Okay. Hello, guys. So today we'd like to talk a little bit about difficulties with designing VR games and experiences. And we are going to base it on our last game, The Wizards, that have been released just a couple of months on Steam Oculus Store. And this is a game about using motion controllers to cast spells, basically become a wizard, and utilize this technology to do cool stuff. And Jakub will start with using Unreal Engine, and then we'll move to problem of locomotion and immersion.
All right, so as Paweł said, I'll talk about using Unreal Engine for a game. I am designer at Carbon Studio, so I have little to no knowledge about coding. So I use it mainly with the blueprints, and I'll explain why I use Unreal Engine to develop our game. Through the course of my studies, I've tried several engines, but since like I said, I have no knowledge about coding, I had to stick with Unreal, but I'm quite happy with it, actually. And here are a few key features I believe are most important for me. Like intuitive design UI is like the core of any app or any engine, so that's always a good thing. And the drag and drop system, which works both in editor, like when you're placing objects to set up a scene, or blueprints, which are like drag and drop node-based coding. It's very simple, like in the basic nature, but it can get a bit more complicated. And of course, the abundance of resource. There's a lot of YouTube tutorials, resources on Unreal Engine forums, and on even the documentation by Epic. So that's a great way to start developing games, even if you don't know how to code, like in my case was. And here's a small example how the node-based system works. Each node serves a different purpose. The small nodes on the left side are like variables. You probably know them, like booleans, integers, vectors, and with this visual representation, it's easy to get into it and know what's going on, basically. Red nodes are like the start of a line or some action, and blue nodes like go through and some things happen, magic happens. So here's like the very basic blueprint. So it's simple. It's just like sliding door. When player enters an area, the door slides sideways or upwards, however you want it, depending on the input you put into the blueprint. And for me, it's very useful to create simple mechanics and to prototype them within the engine itself, but also in VR, so I can hop into the headset and see if it works, how it works, if it feels well, because in VR, the immersion and the feeling of the world is very important. But also there can be some more advanced blueprints. This is a blueprint for a game. It's one of the earliest. It was one of a spell that upon summoning you can touch the like projectiles that find a random target from the enemies. So here's the whole logic, how it spawns, how it is activated, what happens if it doesn't have any target, and stuff like that. So blueprints can be really simple, like the first one shown, but also can get complicated easily. And maybe that's not the best example, but there's a lot of tools to organize the work. So you can align the lines, the nodes, so that it's like a straight line of, let's say, code. You can comment it, group it into pairs of similar like functions, and you can do all crazy stuff within it. So if anyone wants to try making games, I really highly recommend it. And now let's get into the juice of the dog, the prototyping within VR, because right now with so many additions to Unreal Engine, making games in VR in Unreal Engine is really great. As a level designer, I mostly use the VR editor, which allows you to create levels within the VR headset. Use the motion controllers to place objects on the scene. You can see the scale, if it feels right, because it's very important to get the scale right in VR, because if something is too big, too small, it stands out and it breaks the immersion, which is like the key point of having fun in VR. So, and it also uses the drag and drop system, which is like omnipresent in Unreal Engine. So here's an example how a prototype after white boxing looks like. I just place boxes that represent the walls, the objects. It's like very early prototype. And when we are happy with it, we tried it out with other people. And if it's done, if it's good, we can then add the art, models, and stuff like that. And this is mainly done in the VR editor. I placed it all myself within the headset, which allows me to know if the area is big enough or small enough, if the corridors are the right size, and if there is if I want the player to see a certain places in the level. And here's like the level looks after we've added some models to it, and it is also made within the prototyping. And as I said, the prototyping in VR makes it so much easier because you feel how the game would look for the player, for the consumer, because you are already looking at it as he would. And this is the key point in VR games. So this very, very good tool to use and create levels within the Unreal Engine. And that will be it from me. Now Paweł will talk about a bit of immersion and locomotion schemes in VR.
Okay, so to start the topic of designing for immersion, let's start with some terms. And let's start with the presence and the state of presence. And this is something that I would define as the moment when, on the subconscious level, human players or user's brain is convinced that what you see on the screen of a VR headset is your reality. And good example of them is of presence is when you, for instance, play super hot, and there are bullets approaching your way, so you want to dodge the bullets, so you crouch, and then you want to stand up, so you grab the edge of a bar or table and you collapse because the bar wasn't really there, it was just in VR. But your brain believed that it's there, so yeah, that's the presence. And the second term is immersion, and I would define immersion as a, just for the sake of this presentation, as a factor that leads to the state of presence. So, and there are a couple of things that can like add to the immersion or can break it. And when it comes to things that add to the immersion, we believe that the most important thing are interactive objects. So being able to really touch, I mean, like pick stuff, everything that's within the grasp of a player should be movable. So this way you let the player immerse more in the VR world, and it's something that the player expects from this world. And sorry, this graphic should be with the interactive objects. Yeah, so this is the example of object that's set as movable in Unreal Engine, and it's really simple. So you just have to set some classes, and then you can add it to a lot of objects, and everything, if you think that something is light enough and small enough to pick it, then just add this class and it will work. And the second thing is the immersive user interface. So instead of placing some buttons, something that we know from flat games, it's better to make sure that all the interactions and or the things that player have to like choose levels, stuff like that, are done within VR in an immersive way. Because in VR we don't have a screen, so it's impossible to display something on the screen. If you try to do it, then we do something that's wrong, because VR is all about breaking the screen and getting inside the game. So when you're inside the game, you don't want to just have like flat menus and just point at stuff and press buttons. That's not the way it should work. And the third thing is expected reactions. So the more, when you're in VR, your brain expects everything to work just like in real world. So if something does not work the way we would expect in real life, it can break the immersion and break the state of presence. So for instance, if we have fireballs in our game, just allow the player to set things on fire with these fireballs, because it's something that we would expect from in real world. And when it comes to things that break the immersion, basically everything that is not adding to the immersion is breaking it. So if we have inconsistency, if we have UI that's not immersive, if we have unexpected reactions, things start to glitch and behave the way we would not expect in real world, it will break the immersion and break the presence. And when it comes to the inconsistency, something that Jakub mentioned, sense of scale is very important. So if you have a chance to put on the headset and test stuff and see how it looks from within VR, that's very important, because otherwise, for instance, on this picture, it may seem that everything is fine on the flat screen, but when you put on the headset, you soon realize that the table is too small compared to chairs, things on the table are too big, the doors are too small. So these are things that are only perceptible from within VR. And here's a video example of interactions and expected reactions in the wizards. So this is basically choosing a level. So instead of just pressing some buttons, you have to pick slot from the map, and then that's how you start a level. Here are some objects that are not part of the core gameplay of the game, but still we allow players to pick them and even break them if it's breakable, just to make it immersive and make it consistent. And here, expected reactions, the bottle will not burn, but the book will, because it's a book. And of course, fireballs, destroying crates, and setting grass on fire. And it's really not that much work. At least in Unreal Engine, it's really simple to add classes like that to the objects. And it will be something that, you know, like if the game have like 1 hour of gameplay, story-wise, players will spend like 2 hours in the game if they can just pick books from the shelves and put them in the fire. It's basically how VR works. And now for the locomotion. Let's start with the question why we believe that locomotion is so important in VR that we'd like to devote 10 minutes to this topic. So the thing is that locomotion is something that can add to the immersion, or it can break it. And even worse, it can make some players sick. And this is probably the last thing we would like to have in our games or experiences, especially when it comes to B2B. When we have clients, we don't want them to get sick. And again, on Steam or Oculus Store, we don't want to get negative reviews because people got sick playing our games. And there are many different ways of approaching the problem of locomotion in VR, just to make sure that it's immersive, that's something that's convenient, but also it does not break that do not make people sick. And two most popular solutions to locomotion in VR are free movement and teleportation. And free movement is something that we know from, let's call them flat games. And it's basically smoothly traveling through the worlds, just like we know from the FPS games on PCs. And free movement can be either gaze-based or controller-based. So gaze-based means that we move the direction we look, just like in flat games. And controller-based means that we move into the direction that we point the controller. And it may at first glimpse, it may be more, you may think that gaze-based is better, but actually controller-based is much, much better, and less people get sick playing with controller-based free locomotion, because if we have the controller and this is how we decide which way we move, then the game can find out the direction that we face as a player, and with all body, not only with the head. Because in real life, you usually go one direction and you can look around. And to achieve this in VR, you have to disconnect the direction you look from the direction you walk. So basically, you walk here because here is the direction I'm facing as a person. But at the same time, I can look even behind me. I can look around, watch the surrounding, and the camera will not follow the direction I look. And it's much convenient solution. And when it comes to the teleportation, it can be either node-based or free. So node-based means that we can only switch between predefined spots, and free teleportation means that we can basically teleport to any flat surface. And free teleportation is something that's chosen by many developers because it's the safest solution. It's just like being sure that no one will get sick, because basically there's no locomotion at all. There's no movement on the screen. So the body is not moving and there's no movement on the screen. But at the same time, it's something that for many is breaking the immersion, and it's not convenient because this is not the way we walk around in real life. None of us can teleport, at least to my knowledge. So when it comes to our experience with implementing different movement schemes, we have a game called Alice VR that was released almost 2 years ago. And in this game, we decided to go only for free movement because we thought that we should be okay. We thought like maybe 10% of players would get sick, but they will not buy the game at the first place. But unfortunately, we got mixed reviews soon after the release. And a lot of people were reporting, like 80% of negative reviews were reports about motion sickness. So we had to spend 6 weeks to add the teleportation to the game. But it was a little bit too late, and we did not manage to turn the waves and and get positive reviews again. So with our second game, we thought, okay, so if people got sick playing our first game, let's go for teleportation only this time. And it was 1 year later, but unfortunately, we got mixed reviews again. And it turned out that right now people hated teleportation, and everyone was only about free movement. And it was just 1 year, but the whole VR community got their VR legs, so they learned to play games and moving freely and not getting sick. This is, I think it's basically thanks to games like Onward or Pavlov VR, so this kind of Counter-Strike in VR games, very popular, multiplayer only, and these games do not provide you with teleportation. One of them tried it, but no one used it. It's just like free movement games. So if you want to play them, and you play them for hours every day, because it's something like Counter-Strike. It's a game that do not have story that ends. It's just like you can play and play again. Then when you start another game, you expect this game to feature similar movement scheme as the game that you play every day for 4 hours. So if we did not provide players with free movement in the Wizards, and they got really pissed off. So we were forced to add free movement to the game, but fortunately it was early access, so we managed to explain that, okay, we are still learning, if you want it, you'll have it. 4 weeks later, we had free movement in the game. We redesigned a lot in the game to utilize free movement. This sense of exploration that we added, that was enough to get, right now we have 88% of positive reviews on Steam, a lot of sales for a VR game. And it basically was thanks to adding free movement and also making sure that we reach players with this information. So the takeaway is that instead of trying to choose only one locomotion scheme in VR, the best thing you can do is basically give players options. So this is a screenshot of locomotion settings menu in the Wizards. And as you can see, you can choose whether you want to use free movement or not, if it's going to be gaze-based or controller-based, how fast will be the movement, if you want to rotate with snap turning or with constant rotation or no rotation at all. If you play on Vive, you do not have to use it at all, so you just rotate with your body. And yeah, it's something that really worked. Yeah, and we made sure that we cover the whole spectrum of different players. So the user base of VR is so small that you do not want to narrow it even more with choosing only one option. And here is a video example of different movement schemes in the Wizards. Here's teleportation with possibility to decide which way you will face after you teleport. This is how it works. Here's a free movement, and it's controller based. So as you can see, when I go the direction I point with my hand. And the last thing, here we have gaze-based free locomotion. So it's just connected to the gaze, and it's really weird because it's just like going this way because you look straight and everything just it's really weird. Okay, so that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. And if you want, you can play the Wizards on the second floor. It's available today. And if you have some questions, just please wait for the panel. We'll have a couple of minutes to answer those. Maybe you'd like to share your stories with implementing locomotion or in VR or something about the immersion. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.